My. James A. Raymond Jr. Man, I hadn't heard from you in a long time until today. I had even actually forgot that you even, existed. But here you are, man. It's good to see you again, man. So let me. I wrote up a response, but then Facebook said too many line breaks. I don't know what that even means, but too many line breaks. So instead of making several posts, and instead of missing the opportunity to engaging with you, I just figured I'd make a quick little video. Plus, it'd give me some content to put on my channel. Yeah, I know you were kidding, but just like me, you know how to kid and cut down at the same time. A hide behind the humor strategy. Well, ain't nobody hiding, but it is a use of humor. But yeah, you're right, though. I do know how to joke around with people by teasing them, kidding with them, putting them down. That's how me and most men I know, that's how we communicate with one another. Because we're usually talking to other men who don't wear their feelings on their sleeve. And enough of the feminine shit already. We both know that you would never say this face to face at most of the men you throw this at. And so does everyone else. You only do this to try to invoke anger so you can somehow consider yourself the victor in the argument. And other than painting your nails and putting on a dress, that's as feminine as you can get. Okay. So let's dive into that, shall we? And so does everyone else. That's another example of a feminine mindset there. Because, who in the world is this everyone else you're talking about, James? Feminine minds think of themselves as if they're in front of a collection of people who are looking at them and listening to them all the time. They see themselves as like the main character in a story, and there's some audience or some group who's listening to them or watching them. That's part of the basic format of a feminine mind. And this is because females are social creatures on average. I'm a very social male, so I am an unusually social male. But females are typically social creatures, It's a bunch of little girls that like turkeys. You can gobble at turkeys and they'll all gobble back at you. You get a bunch of little girls together. One of them can squeal and all of them will squeal. The whole little group of girls will squeal. Little boys don't do that. You say, and those little girls, they grow up and then when they become women, they still squeal like that. Go to like a baseball game or something. Most of the ones you hear squealing, almost all of the people in the stands that you hear, woo, and all that kind of stuff, are women. For some reason, women, they just love squealing, and they'll all squeal together. And it's unusual to find a woman. My wife doesn't do that, but she's an unusual woman. It's unusual to find a woman that's in a group that doesn't squeal or yell or cheer when other women in the group do it. It's like they're geese. Geese will do the same thing. Geese they'll all honk at the same time. If you get on their property, honk, honk, they all do it at the same time. It's really interesting. But it's because women are just social creatures. They're not very individualistic. So they think of themselves in a social context with everyone else around them. And so that's why you said over here, how did you say it? Face to face at most of the men you throw this at, and so does everyone else. Because two men talking about some sort of disagreement, they're typically not going to refer to everyone else, some imaginary group that supposedly agrees with them. Because men, the masculine mind in general, doesn't base what's true or false on whether or not all of their social group agrees. See, that's how women think. But at any rate, I actually was trying to just be friendly with you and play around, but I guess you're too soft and gentle emotional for that. I guess you just can't take a normal man-to-man, iron sharpening iron, kind of good-natured ribbon like that. But I was actually just trying to play around with you. But and I am curious as to who this everyone else is that you're saying agrees with you or or whatever. You can't name who the everyone else is, and so that would then prove that everyone else is some imaginary group you have conjured up in your mind that you think's listening to you or reading what you're typing or watching you or something. And again, that's feminine thinking. You don't have to agree with me for it to be true. So this wasn't an argument for me to win either, James. This was me trying to treat you like I do all other men and like make a little joke. But I forgot you were a woman, so you got offended. So yes, I absolutely. You say I don't do this face to face. There's no way for you to know that because you've never been around me in real life. But there's a lot of people who have, and I absolutely behave like this in person if the opportunity presents itself. Now, if I were to bump into you in Walmart, I wouldn't even recognize you probably. But if I did recognize you, if you recognize me and you came up to me, I wouldn't just, the minute you walk up, start making fun of your hair or like I'm 6'3", if you're real short, like if you're like 5 foot nothing, I wouldn't just out of the blue tell you to stand up when you talk to me. But if the opportunity kind of presented itself or whatever, I might look over at you and tell you to stand up when you talk to me, even though you're actually standing. So that'd be one of those kind of slid in there short jokes. I'll probably do that if the conversation went that direction. I wouldn't be standing there saying, well, I don't want to make fun of James because he might get offended. And then what? I wouldn't. That's just not part of my personality. So I absolutely do behave like this in person if the opportunity presents itself, and I can give you plenty of witnesses of that. For instance, my brother Justin can verify to you that I'll say most anything I want to whomever I want, whenever I'm in person with them or not, especially if it's something that's as trivial as what I've said to you in this post here. My sons, Micah, Noah, even Jude, they can tell you the same thing. Hell, my wife, Deidre, she can also verify that I'll say whatever I want to say, whenever I want to whomever I want to say it, James. And I mean, you don't have to believe me, but you don't have any grounds. You don't have any reason to not believe me other than just what your feminine thinking mind tells you based on what you see on Facebook. But you've never been around me in person, even though we live in the same area. At least to my knowledge, you've never been around me in person. If you have been around me in person, I didn't know it, and you certainly didn't walk up to me and say hello. So I remember a few years ago when I was at, my wife and I, we were headed, this is just an example, we were headed to Neighbors to get something to eat. And I guess we were coming from the east because we took that exit there, that exit 15 ramp from westbound I-10 onto Government. And as we were coming around that ramp, man, this Honda, that's a one-lane exit ramp. I think it still is. It was back then anyway. This Honda come just zipping around me on the left, man, on the shoulder of the road, and it wasn't like I was creeping. Came flying around me on the shoulder of the road there. Rocks and dust flying, and I was like, well, look at that damn fool. I guess he was in a hurry to get to Government Street, but kill somebody. Got off the ramp. We were headed to Neighbors, they're on 3 Notch. Give me some of that fried chicken, And so we changed lanes, and they changed lanes, and they got in the turning lane for 3 Notch, and I got in the turning lane for 3 Notch. They probably thought I was following them, but I was headed to Neighbors. We just happened to be going towards 3 Notch together. Well, I'll be doggone when we didn't get down there to Neighbors, they didn't slow down and pull into the Neighbors parking lot. Isn't that ironic? That the fool took my life, his life, and my wife and the woman that was with him's life in his hands to hurry up to get to Neighbors like that. And we were headed to the same place. Ain't that funny? I said, this is going to be interesting. So we pulled on in park. We went in, sat down to eat, and they were a few booths over. Him and some gal he had with him, they both looked like they were probably in their mid to late 20s at the time. They might have been 30 years old. He might have been 30, I don't know. He was one of them, I don't know, kind of frat boy looking types, kind of that Backstreet Boys, NSYNC kind of a Justin Timberlake look to him, looked like he'd spend a little time in the gym, maybe like a baseball player or something, somebody like that, built kind of like that, And then his mom was with him. I mean, she was a little old gal, but there was a couple of old people that was sitting there in the booth eating with him. So the best I could tell watching their interactions, the 2 old people were her parents, and that would explain why he was maybe running late. to get there, and in such a hurry, I guess, to meet her parents. Maybe, I don't know. That's just what I surmise, but I don't know for sure. So I sat there watching him, and he knew who I was. He saw me watching him, and he glanced over at me. I ate my dinner and chatted with my wife and whatever. And like one time, he even stood up out of the booth, and he unzipped and took off this outer jacket that he had. And he had on this real tight fitting like T-shirt thing, And he stood there for a minute, and I guess he thought he was intimidating me. I don't know. I done told it too many ass whoopings in my life or something like that to intimidate me. When we got ready to leave, I just strolled over there and reached my hand out and introduced myself, shook his hand, and I started telling him, I started explaining to him, I said, man, look, when I was young like you, I did a lot of crazy stuff, took a lot of crazy chances. I was in such a hurry everywhere. I said, I ain't mad at you or nothing. I said, I just want to take time to encourage you and give you a little wisdom to slow down a little bit, enjoy life. Because a lot of folks are like you, they just speeding through life, taking crazy chances, and they're in a big hurry to get somewhere and die. They're just going to get somewhere and stop, and then all you got left to die. So slow down a little bit and enjoy your life, man. Stop taking such chances on the roadway like that. Well, he looked over at me and he said, well, let's step outside and discuss this. He didn't mean like we were going to go outside and fight. He wanted to get me away from them two old people, which is another reason I think that was her parents. And well, when I walked up there, I shook his hand, and I put my hand on his shoulder, because this ain't my first rodeo. Well, he said that, and he went to stand up, and I just pushed him back. I just kind of nudged him back down and sat him back down in that booth, right? And I told him, I said, no, there's no need in, going outside where it's private. I said, I done said everything I need to say. I said, I just, And then the old guy, he never did look up at me. He was just looking straight forward at that dude, that young dude across the table from him. And I forget what the guy's name was, but he called him by name, and he said, what's going on? And the young dude just kind of shook his head and looked out the window, and so I looked at the old guy, and I said, oh, it's no big deal. I said, but I was just coming off of the ramp here, and I guess he was in a hurry to get here. He didn't want to keep y'all waiting. He passed me on the shoulder of the road, took their lives and our life in his hands. And I remember when I was young like this, young and dumb and in a hurry, I'd take crazy chances, and I'd just hate to see something bad happen to him, I said, I just want to let him know I don't have any hard feelings against anybody, but, he just needs to slow down a little bit and enjoy life, And the old man never did even look up at me or, recognize my existence. The whole time he was just staring at that dude while I was talking. So I was finished saying what I had to say, and I turned around and walked off. Me and my wife walked off, and about halfway across the little dining room there, headed towards the register, I heard him behind me yell across the restaurant at me, thanks a lot for screwing up our lunch. I just kind of waved over my shoulder, went on, paid my ticket, and left. That's just one example, And I got many, many, many of them. I don't really care if you believe them or not, but I'm just trying to help you have some understanding in your life, James. So, it was great for me. And I was happy to help this guy learn a valuable lesson in life, slow down a little bit, enjoy the ride, be safe. Don't be taking people's lives in your hand. A few years ago, too, there was this incident at Sam's Warehouse, the little tire store. I used to buy tires there, and I was standing there one day talking to the tire manager because he was trying to tell me my tire warranty was gone, and I was talking to him about it. And then my wife walked up, and she interjected something into the conversation, and he looked over at her, and he said, well, like I was telling your husband here before you butted into the conversation, that didn't go over well. That didn't go over well at all. Well, he disrespected my wife like that, especially considering it was basically her truck, too, So before that was over with, the store managers were there, and there was a big hullabaloo. But we got it all straightened out, whatever. So we took care of that. Let's see. There was a guy years ago. I guess this was about 15 years ago. My daughter was 16 years old, and I had dropped her off there at the Barnes and Nobles when it was there, and had gone over to Starbucks to grab me some coffee. While she went in there and grabbed a book she was wanting to buy, and I was gonna come back and pick her up. When I got to Starbucks to order my coffee, she called me on the phone, and I could hear the manager standing beside her, just going off on her about how it was closing time. She had to leave. She had to get out of the store, blah, 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 blah. So, okay, Kaylin, don't worry about that. So I didn't even order my coffee. I went back out, got in my truck, drove over there, walked up in the Barnes and Nobles. I looked at Kaylin. I said, who is the manager? She pointed at me. I walked over there. I stepped right up on the dude. I said, I'm not a 16-year-old girl. How about you holler at me? How about you want to get and holler at me and try to intimidate me? I'm not 16 years old. I don't intimidate well. Well, that dude, he had a couple of little things to say. Before it was over with, they had security over there. We got all that straightened out, too. But I didn't just look at my feet like you seem to think over here, you know. But, I mean, I understand why you would think that. Because, I mean, it's probably hard for you to believe that a guy as good looking as me and as articulate as I am would be redneck to actually stand up and take the heat of the kitchen. But I am. So that's Barnes and Nobles. Let me see. I don't really keep track of these things in my mind because they're not things that I'll wear as a badge to try to prove my manhood. You know, 36 years with the same woman and having raised 5 kids and not become a convict or not hang myself in the backyard and not become a drug addict or alcoholic or whatever. Those are the kind of things that I mostly look at to like point to my validity in life. It's not incidents like this, but I'm just giving you examples of when things like this have happened. I'll never forget the time, and I have video evidence of this. I used to have it on YouTube years ago, but when I got my realtor's license, I took these videos down because they're not exactly flattering, you know. But I'll never forget years ago when this cop was working security inside of the Tillman's Corner Walmart, and the little gal that drives the blinky-dink truck out in the parking lot decided that I was a problem. And next thing I know, she went and got him to come out there, and he wanted to try to tell me to step out of the car. I asked him why, and then he threatened to taser me if I didn't step out of the car. Before that was over with, there was 5 or 6 cops down there, 3 or 4 squad cars. They had me detained for about an hour before they ultimately let me go. And I went on about my business like I wanted to do to start with, but that cop had just decided that he was going to show out. And I mean, I got video evidence of that. If you'd like, I could go to my YouTube and make it public again, send you the link. You could see I'm not kidding about that. When the popo showed up, one of the cops, the first actual on-duty cop that showed up was a little short black cop, shaped like a little fire plug. And you see in the video when he gets out of his car, he's putting on his little leather fingerless gloves. That fool got out of his car prepared to open that king size can of whoop ass on Big Daddy, but he wasn't able to do that. Why? Because I'm smarter than that, that's why. But yeah, that's a perfect example. I mean, those guys have a license to stomp your head into the asphalt, but I still didn't look down at my feet and say, yes, Miss Daisy, I'll be driving now. I still didn't do that. I never have done that, man. It's just not part of my personality. It's just not. The first buyer I ever had as a real estate agent was this dude that moved here from Missouri, Ohio. Yeah, and he didn't understand how Big Daddy worked. So my first buyer, I ended up firing him. I ended up throwing away my first buyer because he didn't want to act right. So you can't even pay me to look at my feet and act crazy. I had a client shopping Bayfront Homes a few years ago. He's moving here from Atlanta. He was in the $600,000 to $700,000 price point. That would have been a nice deal. But one day he wanted to tell me on the phone, which I wasn't in person now that I think about it, on the phone, that he just needed me to fill out the paperwork. And if I wasn't willing to fill out the paperwork, that he'd get somebody who could. And so I explained to him that what I was telling him was all part of my job. I told him, I said, but I think it would be a good idea for you to just get another realtor because I am not your little punk bitch to do just whatever the damn hell shit you want to tell me. I sure did what I told him. And so there was a lot of money involved there. But you know what? Big Daddy gonna say what Big Daddy gonna say. I mean, it don't matter. Does not matter. But, you know, they held me there for about an hour before they finally let me go. It was July the 4th, actually. We were on the way home from doing all our July 4th stuff that day. So as I was driving off, I rolled down the window and I yelled out to them, Happy 4th of July, freedom. And drove on off, went home. And the whole time they were saying, just leave, just leave. It was great. It was great. By the time I got finished with that you know how the cop will be in uniform, but he'll actually be off duty working on the side as a security person for Walmart. By the time I got finished having a conversation with that little fella, he started telling me that the best thing for me to do is for him and for the two of us not to have any more conversations. Yeah. He initiated the conversation when he flagged me down, but before it was over with, he was telling me that the best thing for me to do is I just needed to stop talking to him. So you know what I did, James? I kept talking to him. You can see that in the video if you want me to. I'll send you the link to the video. But yeah, that was July the 4th. But I mean, I can't, I mean, I just a whole bunch of these type incidents, I had to stop and think about it. I guess the most recent incident was when Deidre had her car accident a year ago this past September, where that 18-wheeler ran into over on Industrial Road in Pascagoula. You know, and Deidre has a very, it could be a lethal, it's a chronic condition, but it could be deadly if it's not cared for. So I met the ambulance at the emergency ring there at Sling and Liver Hospital, and I was trying to impress on the EMT how important it was that she had her emergency injections. And well, that woman, she looked like a bulldog. She looked more like a man than I did, and I guess she just didn't like me trying to tell her how to do her job, I guess. There, she wanted to get all smart with me. Well, that didn't work out well, you know. A fella was under pressure, you know what I'm saying? Before that was all over with, they had 3 of them Pascagoula PDs there with me out underneath that canopy having a conversation. My sons, Mike and Jude, were there. They can attest to that. But you know what happened when that was all over with? Them 3 cops went on. Them Singing River Hospital security guards that are in that little office there in the ER, they went back into their little office, and I went back in there and sat down in the waiting room waiting to go back to see my wife. Yeah. But what Big Daddy didn't do is look at his feet and say, yes, Miss Daisy, I'll be driving now. Because homie don't play that, James. I know you think I do because the only contact with me you have is on Facebook. And you probably thinking what a normally sane, reasonable person would think. You're probably thinking, there ain't no way that this fool would say this stuff to folks in person. There ain't no sane person in the world would say this stuff to somebody in person. Well, your mistake you make when you think that is I'm not necessarily a sane person. I'm Dane, the Dane man. Big Daddy. That's me. So I definitely do. So let's see. That was the Singing River Hospital incident. Let me see. I can't remember any more right off the top of my head. 'Cause like I said, I don't keep track of that. But just suffice it to say, man, that I'm the guy who back in high school, I toted a lot of unnecessary ass whoopings back in high school because I was this way back in high school. I'm going to say what I'm going to say. I'm going to do what I'm going to do whenever, whomever, however, if I feel so driven to do it. And I've never held my tongue or looked at my feet because I was afraid somebody was going to shun me socially or engage with me physically. Like I said, man, I'm not some Billy badass that, I can just whoop anybody. No, man, I have received far more ass whoopings than I have ever dished out. But I still said what I wanted to say and did what I wanted to do. And if folk didn't like it, they didn't like it. But that's me. I've been this way for 54 years and counting. You know, a few years ago, I just thought it was a few years ago. We had been up, me and my family, my brother, his wife, we'd been up in the Hattiesburg area, Hattiesburg, Mississippi, helping my sister-in-law move. I think it was a weekend we helped her move or whatever. We were on the way out of town. Justin wanted to stop by the gas station, buy him a little can of snuff or whatever. We pulled up in there at the front of the store, dropped him off. You know, Deidre was driving because, man, I was tired. And we pulled a trailer behind me, and as she was starting to pull off, you know, she's going kind of slow, pulling off. It was kind of a tight spot in there. Here comes Justin storming back out of the store. I was like, what's he coming out of the store looking so mad about? And I told her to stop. And he come out of the store, and he went to open the door. And, come on, let's go for screw this. And as it turns out, the clerk thought Deidre was parking at the front door. So Justin had gone in there and asked for his snuff or whatever. And the clerk said, well, I'm not going to serve you. She got to move. She can't park in front of the store. Justin tried to explain to her that she's not parking. She dropped me off. She's pulling off. And then the clerk was like, well, I'm not going to save you at all until she's moving part, blah, blah, blah. Just real attitude. And this clerk was showing out for some buddies of his he had in there and everything. So Justin was like, well, screw that. Just I go somewhere else and left. He comes storming out. But the clerk followed him out of the store, the clerk and 4 or 5 of the clerk's buddies. And the clerk still showing out. I was like, oh, my God, So I step out of the truck. I'm trying to get Justin, just going up and getting the truck. Justin already had his door open, but the clerk showed up running his pothole, So they're going back and forth, back and forth. So I said, okay. So I look over at this clerk. He wasn't no little bitty dude either, by the way. I looked over at the clerk. I said, look, sir, I understand, but he is not going to get back in his truck as long as you're out here running your mouth. If you're just going back in the store, I'll get him on up in the truck and we'll leave. Be over with. Well, then the clerk wanted to start running his head at me. The whole time, my wife is actually on the phone with her sister who's trying to figure out what all the hullabaloo's about. So then the dude wants to start running his mouth to me, threatening to call the cops on me. I'm trying to reason with the dude. So finally, my cork popped. And I told him to do a thing. Call the police, whatever. I don't care, but, whatever. Back and forth, back and forth. Cop finally showed up. A cop asked, has anybody put a hand on anybody? No, ain't nobody put no hand on nobody because that clerk knew better than that. And he said, okay, well, if nobody has touched anybody, he looked at the clerk. He said, you go back in the store. And he looked over at me and my brother. He said, y'all get in the truck and get out of here, which was exactly what I tried to tell the clerk we would do. I told the clerk to start with, if you'll just go back in the store, just hush, go back in the store, I'll get him loaded up and we'll leave. Well, the clerk didn't want to do that. He wanted to show out. He thought he was somebody. Started yelling at me about how I'm going to jail tonight and all this kind of stuff. And I tried to tell him I'm not going to go to jail. I told the clerk, I said, look, dude, when the cop gets here, all he going to do is tell you to go in the store and tell me to leave. And that's what I'm offering to do now, but you don't want to do it. And I ain't going to be able to get my brother to get in the excursion here as long as you're out here running your head. You going to jail, now you going to jail tonight. And after we waited there about 15 minutes for the cop, finally said, well, I tell you what I'll do. If y'all just go ahead and leave, well, then we'll just forget all about it. Well, by then I told him, I said, no, we ain't forgetting about nothing. You done pushed it this far. We're going to wait till the cops to get here. And that's how it turned out. Exactly what I told that clerk was going to happen. The cop told the clerk, go in the store, hush and go in the store. And he told me and my brother, y'all get in your truck, go home, which is exactly what I offered to do. So, that's just, I'm the same guy in person, James, that I am on the internet. I absolutely 100%, as Justin Wilson would say, guarantee it. So if I say something to joke around with you like I did in this conversation, because you and I live in the same area, man, generally the same area. And like I said, I'm 6'3". I weighed in at I think 320, 327 at the doctor a week or so ago. And I really look at all this, man. I'm real easy to pick out in public, man. So if you see me around in public, man, come on over and say hi. And if the opportunity presents itself for me to say something, teasing around with you, I'm going to say it if the mood strikes me. And that's what I'm going to do. And when I do, what are you going to do? How are you going to respond, James? This whole thing you want to talk over here about, you want to never do that face-to-face to a man, all of that brouhaha, posturing, bullcrap. Like this is high school or middle school or something, man. That's more crazy woman stuff, man. So what you gonna do when I do? Like if I just said the same thing to you in person that I said up here in my original response to you, how would you have responded, James? What you gonna do? You gonna hit me? You gonna hit me, man? You gonna punch me in the nose? You gonna give me a black eye? What you gonna do, man? You gonna act like a little boy and lose control, let your emotions control your behavior, and you're gonna try to put a hand on me? That wouldn't be smart. That wouldn't be smart at all, because at the very, very least, you just end up going to jail. So, most men my age and even men as young as you, they've already figured that out. So they typically don't do stuff like that. So what would you do, man? Because you put your hand on me, whatever will be, right? Que sera, sera. So and at the very least, you go to jail, man. Maybe worse. So you ain't going to have accomplished nothing. So what you going to do, man? You going to get mad. Because women get to do that. Women get to lose their temper and, put their hands on men and everything, and they don't really have to worry about going to jail for the most part. But that's not the case when you're dealing with two men. So what would you do? I mean, because I would certainly defend myself to the best of my ability, but at the end of the day, you'd end up going to jail. So what have you accomplished? Nothing. So what else would you do? You get mad and scream and yell and holler and throw some kind of little boy tantrum duck fit at me? Okay. If you did that, I would just kind of laugh at you, man. So, I mean, what would you do, man? I mean, what else you got? What else you got, James? Because if you ever encounter me in person, I will give you my word 100% that I will be the same guy in person that I am online. And then what? Nothing. Nothing, James. That's what. This ain't some schoolyard, dude. So, but if you want me to send you the link so you can see those YouTube videos of mine that I have where I had that, where they kept me detained for investigative purposes. Detained for investigative purposes. There at the Tillman's Corner Walmart. If you want that, let me know, man. I'll send you the link, man, because I'm dang,